Now with Tom Brady coming back into the fold for the Buccaneers this upcoming season, what do you think the expectations are going to be set upon him going into the season?
I think they're a playoff team for sure. They're going to win the South just because I don't see Carolina putting anything out there. I don't see New Orleans doing anything, and I also don't see Atlanta doing anything. Now, granted, obviously, Deshaun Watson again is another topic we'll get into in a minute. Unless Carolina goes out there and acquires Deshaun Watson, I don't necessarily see them doing that without giving up a significant draft capital and some other notable players. So, I mean, we'll have to see what happens. But in terms of right now, if Deshaun does not go to Carolina, I just see Tampa running it back in terms of winning the division, potentially going about 11-6, 12-5, which is just enough to get in at the 3 or 4 seed. And at the same time, I do see them making at least a significant playoff push. Maybe an NFC Championship appearance, but I would say that's a stretch just because I just don't have enough faith in this roster the way it's currently constructed. Carlton Davis is probably going to get out of there. Jason Pierre-Paul's going to get out of there. Obviously, Leonard Fournette's going to go chase a paycheck, and then we don't know what's happening with Ronald Jones and a couple of other players that were pivotal in Tampa winning the Super Bowl just a few years ago. So in reality, I say that Tom immediately puts them back into the postseason conversation, but I don't necessarily see it being possible for them to go out there and compete realistically for another Super Bowl. Just because if you take away a big chunk of those players that I just named off and you kind of replace them with either rookies or, just random free agents or even people that just get called up from the practice squad, I don't really see it as somebody, or should I say, I don't see them as someone to make an imprint on me to compete for a championship because there are still other teams around in the NFL that are just better than them, not just on paper, but obviously performance wise. And I'm not going to rule out the Rams for at least going back to the NFC Championship to try and compete for an NFC for another Super Bowl. I know that I predicted that they would lose um, in the Super Bowl prior, but I do think that Tampa adds another dynamic to the competitiveness of the NFC as a whole. But again, I stand firmly on they'll probably be a divisional bounce, if not an NFC Championship loss.
Well, when Brady is back in the fold, you always have to account the possibility that with him on the roster, that you have to consider them at least at a shot for a Super Bowl. Now, I do take your points with a significant amount of respect because this roster is not going to look the same as it did in that Super Bowl run when they beat the Chiefs in Super Bowl 55. However, I do think that this team is going to pretty much cakewalk through the NFC South. That's if Deshaun Watson doesn't get traded to the Carolina Panthers. We don't really know how that's going to play out, but I don't really see him going there. That's something that we'll talk about in a later segment. But all in all, I think they have enough pieces to possibly get to an NFC championship appearance. When I look at the entire scope of the NFC, you have to account for Green Bay. You have to account for the Rams. They just won the Super Bowl. You have to account for teams that are out in the NFC West, like the Arizona Cardinals. You have to account for the Dallas Cowboys, even though that they had a hell of an end to the season in that first round playoff loss. I think that Tampa's in the fold to possibly get there. Now, granted, they have to have some games go their way, but all in all, I think that they'll be in a good position next year. I think Tom, as far as my expectations for him, I think he'll be great. He's coming off of a season where he threw 43 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He threw for 5,300 yards passing, and I thought he was phenomenal. And for somebody who's going to turn 45 when the season starts, you would typically think that he would fall off, that there'd be some sort of regression in his production. I don't see that. And I think going into this upcoming season, I think he could definitely put up 35 touchdowns. He could throw for 4,500 yards. And I think when it's all said and done, I could see Tampa going 12-5, getting to an NFC Championship appearance, possibly a Super Bowl if they get a favorable matchup in the NFC Championship appearance if they get there. It's just I think it is going to be difficult though because it's like you said, there are going to be some pieces that are going to be missing, like Jason Pierre-Paul, Carlton Davis. They had one of their offensive linemen just retire this just a couple of days ago. So I think there's going to be some shifting, and there's definitely going to have to be some adjustments that are going to be made during this offseason for Tampa to possibly get into another Super Bowl. Not going to be easy. This is not going to be like 2020 when they went all the way to Super Bowl 55, beat Kansas City, and Tom got his seventh ring. If Tom were to able to get his eighth ring, This would definitely be a great challenge. And I think the odds are stacked against him. But it's Tom, and you can never really count him out. And I think that competitive spirit, that competitive fire, I think it still burns hot. And I think you always have to account for that. And I never count the guy out no matter what. And I definitely think that when all is said and done, I think that this is it. I think this is probably the last run that we'll see from Tom Brady. And if it is, hey, bro, it's one more Super Bowl quest, and you can never count the guy out from that.